Welcome back, everybody. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
All right. So this time, we're heading to Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, based on an episode of Anatomy of Murder, right? This case,
Okay.
this one's about Mary Jane and Alfred Markwart.
Okay.
Seem like a pretty normal couple, living a quiet life.
Right.
But let me tell you, this one gets, well, it takes some wild turns.
It really does. I mean, this case is a prime example of how looks can be deceiving, especially in these small towns where everyone thinks they know each other.
Exactly. So picture this. March 13th. Alfred comes home for lunch. Everything seems normal, but then he heads back to work, comes home later that day, and finds Mary Jane's body in the garage, covered with a comforter.
That right there, that comforter, it just screams personal connections. Like
Yeah.
whoever did this was trying to, I don't know, shield themselves from what they did.
Yeah, like trying to make it less real or something.
Exactly.
And it gets worse. She wasn't just killed, she was brutally attacked. Gunshots, stab wounds, all to the head. Definitely a crime of passion.
Oh, absolutely. Lots of rage there. But here's the thing. Alfred's 911 call is, well, it's strangely calm. Almost like he's detached from the whole situation. You know, that kind of thing immediately raises eyebrows with investigators.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, how do you react like that when you've just found your wife murdered?
It's tough to say, really.
Yeah.
Everyone processes trauma differently. Some people break down, become hysterical. Others, they go into shock. They shut down emotionally as a defense mechanism. It's complex, so investigators have to be careful not to read too much into demeanor alone. You never know what's going on in someone's head.
True, true. But still, it's definitely suspicious. And get this, before calling 911, Alfred admits to cleaning up after the dog.
Now that's interesting. It makes you think, right?
Totally.
Is it just a routine thing? A final act of care for his wife? Or is he trying to hide something? Potentially getting rid of evidence? It's a small detail, but in a case like this, even the tiniest actions can become significant.
It's like trying to read between the lines, trying to figure out what's genuine and what's calculated. But look, while investigators were trying to figure all this out, another piece of the puzzle went missing. Mary Jane and Alfred's son, Bill. And suddenly, things get even more complicated.
Right, because now you have a missing person in a homicide investigation.
Yeah.
Is he a victim, a suspect, or something else entirely? It throws a whole new wrench into things.
And to make matters worse, Bill had a bit of a troubled past, didn't he?
He did.
Drug-related offenses, conflicts with his mother. It definitely painted a picture of someone who could be capable of violence.
It definitely raised some red flags.
Yeah, so naturally the police headed to the family cabin looking for Bill. And this place, it sounds straight out of a horror movie. Isolated, deep in the woods, real creepy vibes. And what they found there was pretty disturbing. Tarps covered in blood, 9mm casings scattered around. It was like a scene from a nightmare.
Definitely sounds like they stumbled onto something gruesome. But then comes another twist. The blood wasn't human. It belonged to animals. Rabbits, dogs. Bill had been killing and mutilating them.
Oh man, that's just disturbing. What does that tell us about Bill?
Well, this is where things get really dark. Acts of cruelty towards animals. They're rarely isolated incidents. In criminal profiling, it's often considered a big red flag, a warning sign for potential violence towards humans. It suggests a lack of empathy, a desensitization to suffering. Those are big indicators when you're trying to assess someone's capacity for violence.
So, those animal remains, they weren't just a random disturbing discovery. They could actually be a big clue about Bill's state of mind, his potential for violence.
Absolutely. It shifted the focus from simply finding a missing person to potentially catching someone dangerous. And that added a whole new level of urgency to the search.
It definitely did, yeah. And then, a week after Mary Jane's murder, they finally got a break in the case. Bill's car was spotted back in town, which led the SWAT team right to his cabin. After a standoff, they apprehended him. And guess what they found on him? A bloody pocket knife.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I mean, finding a potential murder weapon on a suspect is a huge turning point in any investigation. It's that physical evidence that can tie someone directly to a crime. It's not just circumstantial anymore.
It's like finding the missing puzzle piece, right? And to make matters even more incriminating, the lab test revealed something chilling. The blood on that knife contained DNA from both Bill and Mary Jane. But that's not all. They also found traces of 2 other unidentified females on the knife. And get this, they were related to each other. Talk about a whole other mystery waiting to be solved.
It's layers upon layers of intrigue. You've got Mary Jane's murder, then the potential connection to Bill with all the animal cruelty stuff, and now these unknown DNA samples. It suggests a whole web of people who might be involved.
It's crazy how this case just keeps unfolding. But here's where it gets even weirder. Remember, Mary Jane was shot. Well, the police searched Bill's cabin twice and found nothing. But on the third search, they discovered a 9mm handgun hidden under the refrigerator. I gotta say, that kind of makes me question how thorough those initial searches really were. How do you miss a gun? Not once, but twice.
I get your skepticism. It does seem strange that such a crucial piece of evidence would be overlooked, not just once, but twice. But crime scenes can be chaotic, especially when you're dealing with someone who might be trying to hide evidence. It's possible that key items are only found later, maybe with fresh eyes or different techniques. It doesn't necessarily mean the investigation was botched, but it shows just how hard it can be to process a complex scene.
That's a fair point. I mean, with so much going on, it's easy to miss things. So with all this evidence against Bill, the bloody knife, the hidden gun, the stuff they found at the cabin, they decided to put him on trial for Mary Jane's murder, right?
Yeah. But here's the thing. The trial itself takes a crazy turn. Remember how Bill was deemed mentally unfit to stand trial in the animal cruelty case?
Right.
Well, for Mary Jane's murder, he was declared competent. And what the defense did was, it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
They tried to pin the blame on a dead drug dealer named Jason Fitz.
Wait, a dead guy? How is that even possible?
They presented a letter as evidence that Jason Fitz had written to Bill, possibly with threats. It's a really unusual tactic, trying to shift blame onto someone who can't defend themselves.
It almost sounds like they're exploiting a loophole, trying to create doubt by pointing the finger at someone who can't speak for themselves. Did the prosecution have anything to counter that?
They argued that it was just impossible for this dead drug dealer to have orchestrated the whole thing, planting the evidence and framing Bill. It didn't make sense. It became a question of who you believed, the prosecution's physical evidence or the defense's story, which seemed pretty far-fetched.
It's like a high-stakes game, right? Each
Yeah.
side trying to outsmart the other. So what happened next?
Just when you thought things couldn't get more unpredictable, a last-minute witness came forward. They claimed to have seen a man with a long black ponytail near the crime scene around the time of the murder. Remember, Bill was blonde, so this new testimony threw a wrench into everything, casting doubt on Bill's involvement.
Wow, that's a bombshell. With all these conflicting accounts and the doubt created by the defense, it must have been tough for the jury to reach a decision. So what happened? What was the outcome?
With all the evidence and arguments, the defense offered a plea deal. Guilty, but not guilty by reason of mental disease. Basically, they were admitting he did it, but saying he wasn't in his right mind at the time.
So they were saying he did it, but he wasn't responsible because of his mental state.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But John Tyson, the prosecutor, was pretty confident in his case, and he rejected the plea deal. He believed the evidence was strong enough to secure a conviction.
That's a bold move, rejecting a plea deal and going for a full conviction. So what was the final verdict?
After all the twists and turns, all the evidence and the arguments, the jury came back with a verdict of not guilty.
What? Not guilty? After everything, the bloody knife, the gun, the stuff at the cabin, they just let him walk.
It comes down to reasonable doubt. In our justice system, the prosecution has to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And in this case, the jury felt there were too many unanswered questions, too many conflicting stories to convict him. It's a core principle of our system that it's better to let a guilty person go free than to wrongly convict an innocent one.
That's a tough concept to wrap your head around, especially in a case like this where there's so much seemingly pointing to guilt. So Bill Markwart walked free, and the murder of Mary Jane is still unsolved. It's hard to believe how such a complicated and disturbing case could end like this.
I know, right? It really makes you think about how our justice system works. How even with what seems like a ton of evidence, there can still be enough doubt to prevent a conviction. It's a reminder that justice isn't always, well, it's not always black and white. It definitely highlights the huge responsibility that juries have. They have to make these life-altering decisions. And their decision in this case, it shows how seriously our legal system takes the idea that it's better to let a guilty person go free than to wrongly convict an innocent one. That's a heavy burden, weighing all that evidence and testimony, trying to sort through all the uncertainty, and then deciding someone's fate.
And in this case, it seems like they lean towards protecting someone who might be guilty. It leaves a lot of people questioning the outcome. But even though the trial's over, the story isn't necessarily finished, is it? There's still the issue of those 2 unidentified DNA samples they found on Bill's knife. That loose end, it could lead to new discoveries.
Yeah, that's the mystery that keeps this case alive. Even after the verdict, it's a piece of the puzzle that could unlock the truth. Who are these women? Did they play a role in Mary Jane's death? Were they involved somehow? Or were they witnesses? Maybe even victims themselves? Those are questions that need answers.
It's like a cold case waiting to be cracked open, a new chapter waiting to be written. And with all the advances in DNA technology these days, it's entirely possible they could re-examine those samples with better tools and find something new.
Definitely. Forensic science is always evolving. What was a dead end years ago could be the key to solving a case now. The possibility of finding new information, maybe even identifying those women, it keeps the hope for justice alive.
It just goes to show that even when things seem impossible, we shouldn't give up on the truth. This deep dive has been a roller coaster. Shock, disbelief, frustration. It's a case that shows just how complex the justice system is, how powerful the idea of reasonable doubt is, and how much mystery surrounds unsolved crimes.
It's a story that reminds us that the truth can be hard to find. Sometimes it's like a puzzle with missing pieces. And even when we try our best, some questions just stay unanswered. But we should never stop looking for those answers. Never stop searching for justice.
So, what do you think about this whole thing? Do you believe Bill Markwart was innocent? Or did he get away with murder? And what about those DNA samples? Could they be the key to finding out what really happened? We want to hear from you. Share your thoughts, your theories, anything. Because in a case like this, every new perspective, every idea could help us get closer to the truth. Until next time, stay curious and remember, even in the darkest places, there's always a chance for the truth to come out.